أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
So yesterday we started focusing on the reflective and formative indicators, and we did discuss that how they look in the model, that the arrows are pointing, if the arrows are pointing towards the indicators, then it is a reflective construct. And if the arrows are pointing towards the latent variable, that is the unobserved variable from the indicators, then this is a formative construct. Now, how do we differentiate between the two? And normally, although there is still a debate going on, and you will find different perspective with regards to how they should be used, or whether a construct is reflective or not. But there are a few general guidelines, and a few of them were highlighted yesterday, like this. That, for example, if you've got 4 or 5 items in a construct, and deleting or removing one of the items does not significantly influence the conceptualization and operationalization of the construct, then it can be referred to as a reflective. So these means that they are interchangeable, or they cover for the other items. For example, when the items they combine, they come together to form the outcome or the underlying construct. In that case, it is a formative construct, and the items are not interchangeable, as we saw in this example yesterday. That this is reflective. So if I eat healthy food, even if it is not there, the rest of the two questions can cover the conceptualization of a healthy diet. However, if you look at this health one, even if I remove one, then the rest of it cannot cover for overall the conceptualization of health, because it's ingrained, it's natural to a healthy diet that you have to have a balanced diet. You are healthy if you exercise regularly. If you do not exercise, then you are not counted as a healthy person. And if you do not get sufficient sleep, then obviously the other two cannot cover for it as well. So in this case, health is formative and diet is a reflective. Now, normally what happens is we come across this concept of formative constructs when we are dealing with higher order constructs or hierarchical component modeling. So at lower level, in as I mentioned yesterday as well, that 90%, 95, or even over that, you will not come across a formative construct at lower level. Very few times you may, and even if you come across a construct that is formative or measured as formative at lower level, you've got alternatives. You can search for a new questionnaire, a new scale that actually is reflective in nature. So it's quite possible to have an alternative. But sometimes, as I discussed yesterday, we have got complex concepts. Let's say CSR is a complex concept. Let's say servant leadership. So these, or knowledge management. Now, what happens with these concepts is that they have subdimensions or components, or they have their own lower order constructs or dimensions or determinants. Now, what happens in that case is the analysis, the way we analyze data, it is different. Now, how do we analyze data in that case? But before that, let me show you a few papers on, let's say, if I'm interested in, let's say, studying servant leadership, and I'm searching for my questionnaire on servant leadership. And I come across, let's say, if I'm working on servant leadership in higher education, and I come across this scale here. So development and validation of servant leadership scale in Spanish higher education. And while we are working on it, we come across, let's say, this paper. And this paper has identified seven dimensions of servant leadership. So they've got behaving ethically, development, emotional healing, empowerment, pioneering, relationship building, and wisdom. Now, what happens here is now servant leadership is a higher order construct that is measured using these seven dimensions. And each of these dimensions have different set of items that are used to represent or measure these concepts. And then they obviously they can form or they are reflected in, or servant leadership is reflected in these dimensions. Now, do I take servant leadership at higher order as a reflective construct, or do I take it as a formative construct? Now, in light of what we have discussed yesterday, behaving ethically cannot fill in for development. Development cannot fill in for emotional healing. Empowerment cannot fill in for pioneering, or pioneering cannot fill in for. So these are distinct constructs. They cannot fill in for each other. They are not replaceable. But there is another point here, that even if I remove behaving ethically from my model due to maybe low loadings, due to maybe um, not representing the underlying construct based on my data, is the existence of servant leadership challenged? No, it isn't, because your operationalization might still complement the rest of these 6 dimensions, and those 6 dimensions may be adequate in measuring servant leadership. So in such scenario, what happens is you can use it as reflective, or you can use it as formative. Now, this becomes a more subjective kind of interpretation as to whether I should use it as formative or reflective. Another way is that you look into existing research and see the scale where it has been used previously, and see if they have used it as reflective or formative. Now, I read somewhere, and it was an authentic source. I'm sorry I didn't keep the source, but I know I read it somewhere, that most of the times your higher orders are formative, because they come together, they combine to form the construct. Now, in that case, that formative construct does not fill in for all the definitions of a formative construct. Just like, for example, removing one will obviously, there won't be any existence of the construct. That does not happen. But there is a debate online. Now, it's for you to decide based on the certain characteristics uh, that are filled in and are appropriate, that you decide for whether it is reflective or formative. Another advantage of this debate is then you have an open playing field. Now, when you have an open playing field, what happens is that you take it as formative, you've got an argument for it. You take it as reflective, you have an argument for it. So this gives you an open playing field as to whether you want to take it as higher order formative or higher order reflective. So this is a scale on servant leadership, and the items will be, I guess, in the end here. Yeah, these are the items. So moving on, higher order constructs, also known as the hierarchical component models in the context of PLS-SCM, provide a framework for researchers to model a construct on more abstract dimension, that is higher order construct. So now it is not directly observable. You're not, for example, if I'm measuring a servant leadership, there is no direct statement that actually measures servant leadership. It is the characteristics of that concept that we measure. And once we measure those characteristics of those concepts, that actually leads us to understand how this particular concept is represented in that particular setting. And it is more concrete, and it has more concrete subdimensions, that is a lower order construct. So when you have a higher order construct like servant leadership, as I gave example of, and the paper that I showed, I'll share the paper as well, that you have lower order components. And in that case, we had 7 lower order components. Now, HCM refers to a more general construct that is measured at a higher level of abstraction, while simultaneously assessing several subcontinents. So it is at a higher level, an abstract phenomenon, not directly observable, latent variable, that has subdimensions that actually lead us to understand what makes that higher order construct, and it has got subdimensions. Now, hence, by specifying lower order construct, what you are doing is hierarchical component modeling covers concrete traits of more general conceptual variables. So these lower order construct and their items help us measure the more general conceptual variable of interest. In this case, I've taken it as servant leadership. In the example, I will change it to internal marketing, just as we discussed earlier, or rather yesterday, that internal marketing is a higher order construct that has three subdimensions. One is vision, the other is development, and the last one is rewards. Can we combine different subconstructs to propose a new higher order, suppose if it has not been discussed? Well, yes, you can combine, but then you have to have a theoretical argument for it. You have to have theoretical support for it. And then once you have the theoretical support and you collect the data, you have to validate it analytically as well. Now, for example, let's say me and the professor here, we worked on this construct of servant leadership. Now, in this case, the seven dimensions that we identified did come from existing research. And that existing research, obviously, there were different authors that did this research, and that they had different dimensions. And based on those dimensions items, we identified our own dimensions. So actually, we combined different dimensions. Now, similarly, there are other skills that we did was, for example, let's say, let me show you one more thing here. So here is a paper that we did way back in 2018. And in this, we reviewed the survey instrument for measuring corporate social responsibility. Now, what happened here was that, okay, there are 43 scales at that time to measure corporate social responsibility, and each of those scales have different dimensions. Now, some of them had 4, some of them had 3, some of them had 6. Now, based on these studies, I used these studies to develop my own CSR scale. And in that case, I developed this scale here. Now here, this was a university social responsibility scale that I developed way back in 18. And this scale had these dimensions. Now, if I remember correctly, none of the existing research studies have these 7 dimensions in one study. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dimensions in one study. None of them. So this actually, what happens is some of the dimensions may be coming from one study, another dimension may be coming from another study. So this is quite possible. I hope this answers your question. Okay, thank you. Now, moving on. Now, there are different types of higher order constructs. Normally, there are 4 types of higher order constructs. The first one, if you look here, is your reflective higher order construct. Now, by reflective higher order construct, we mean that, okay, this is your LOC, that is lower order constructs, that actually make up the higher order construct. You can have 3 lower order constructs, you can have 2, you can have 6, you can have 7, you can have 8. Well, it can be any number, but obviously normally it's like 5, 6, or 3, 4. Now, what do you mean by reflective? At lower order, this is a reflective. Oh, sorry, at lower order, this is reflective. Why? Because if you look at the arrows, they are pointing towards these boxes. The arrows are pointing towards these boxes. So it is reflective at lower level here. And then the lower order constructs are also, the higher order construct is also reflective. Why? Because the arrow is pointing from the higher order construct to the lower order construct. So this is reflective at this level, and then reflective at this level as well. So this is a reflective. Why? Because it is reflective at lower order and it is reflective at higher order as well. Now, what do you mean by reflective at lower order? Now, reflective at lower order, as I mentioned earlier, that these items become interchangeable. So when I say reflective at lower order, this means that the items are interchangeable, as we discussed yesterday or earlier in the session. Now, what do you mean by reflective at higher order? Now, these becomes interchangeable as well. Now, these are the items for the lower order constructs. So where are the items for the higher order construct? Every construct will have items. Every single construct will have items. So where are the constructs, items for higher order construct? Okay, how do I clear it? Okay, I'm not very good with PowerPoint. Is there a way to clear it all at once or no? Okay. Okay, I guess this will work. Okay, we'll look into this later. Okay, now look at this. Arrows are pointing towards this from the higher order construct to the lower order constructs. Same is the case with this one, same is the case with this one. So now this LOC1, LOC2, LOC3 are the items for this HOC. So if it is a construct, it has to have items. So now we know the items for LOC. So where are the items for HOC? The items for HOC are LOC, LOC1, LOC2, LOC3. Now this is reflective, reflective at lower level and then reflective at higher order or higher level as well. Now, another common type of higher order constructs is reflective formative. Now, these type 1 or this type 1 and type 2 are the most common ones that are used. You will hardly see any formative reflective or formative formative. Now, what is the difference between reflective and reflective formative? It's very easy. At lower order, or lower order construct is your reflective. Look at this. The arrows are pointing from the construct to the items. And again, why it is reflective or how it is reflective? Because they are interchangeable. Now, at higher order, if you see the arrows are pointing from the lower order constructs to the higher order construct. Now, this means that lower order constructs form your higher order construct. So you combine them to form a higher order construct. Now, again, when it is formative, obviously they are not interchangeable. Now, how do we analyze these two? So before we go on, let's look at some other theory. Any questions up till now? Okay, so validating reflective higher order construct. So how do we validate the reflective higher order construct? Now again, why validating? Again, remember, in structural equation modeling, the first step is always the validation of your constructs. So if you've got lower order constructs, and we have seen how to check their reliability and validity. Now, if you've got higher order constructs, then you have to check their validity as well. So let's assume we have a model. Let's go to our model. Let's assume this is my model. But before I run this model, let me draw a conceptual model for you, theoretical framework or theoretical model that we are interested in testing. All right. So let's assume this is the model that I'm interested in testing. Now let's assume this is the model I'm interested in testing. Now here I've got one IV, one DV, one mediator, two mediators and two moderators that are moderating this relationship from collaborative culture to organizational performance. Now, the data that I've collected is based on existing scales, and those existing scales are like this one. Organizational commitment is a single dimensional scale with 4 or 5 items. Collaborative culture is again a single dimensional scale with 7 or 6 items. Organizational performance, again a single dimensional scale with 5 items. Role conflict, role ambiguity, both single dimensional scales with 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever number of items. But this one here, internal marketing, is a higher order construct. Why? Because the questionnaire that I'm using is by Foreman and Money 1995. And according to Foreman and Money, internal marketing has three subdimensions. And each of those subdimensions dimension is measured using different items. Those three subdimensions are vision, development, and rewards. Now, how will I analyze this model? Now, again, whenever you want to analyze a higher order construct, there are steps that to be followed. So what are the steps? The procedure is the same followed as for reflective lower order constructs. Assess their reliability and validity. So the first step is, obviously every construct at the base of it is a lower order construct. All right. So you have, let's say in this case, internal marketing was measured using three lower order constructs, that is vision, development, and reward. So in total, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 constructs. So irrespective of whether there is a higher order construct or not, doesn't matter. You put in all your constructs, lower order constructs like this in the model. And just as we did on day one, validate, check them for reliability, factor loadings, reliability, and validity. That's it. This is your step one, and report it as we did. All right, create those tables and then the tables for discriminant validity as well. Now, once you have assessed the constructs at lower order, now we are going to move towards the higher order. So you run the program just as, for example, this is my model here. And the model is the same as I have here. But the only difference is internal marketing here has got three subdimensions. So this is lower order construct assessment, irrespective of whether I have a higher order or not. But there is one issue here, which now I see. And the issue is that I've put in the moderator in the wrong way, as we normally do not create moderating effect in the measurement model. So what I'll do is I'll, instead of doing this, I'll remove this for now. Connect. Now, so since they were moderating the relationship between CC and OP, the two moderators will be linked to the DV of the relationship that they moderate. Now this is done, and now the step one is go to calculate PLS-SCM algorithm, path, start. Now look at the outer loadings. All good. You have to obviously paste them in an Excel, arrange them. Construct reliability and validity. All good. Similarly, you will assess it for discriminant validity. All good, because it's less than 0.85. Now that you have assessed the loadings, reliability, and validity for all your lower order constructs, now the next step is not to go for bootstrapping and assess the relationship between variables. You have to validate this whole construct of the higher order construct as well. So you cannot just validate the lower order constructs and go for higher assessment of the hypothesis. So you have to validate it. What to validate? What is the higher order construct? You have to validate the higher order construct of internal marketing. Now, how to do it? For this, we will open the report. And on or in the output, you will see this latent variables. Just underneath outer weights, you will see latent variables. Now, once you see this, click on it and you will see scores, correlation, covariance, descriptives. So you can have descriptives for your latent variable as well. But you can have correlation between latent variables in your study as well. But I'm not interested in all these other things for now. I'm interested in latent variable scores. So for each response, Smart PLS creates a score, a composite score for each of the variable in your study or each of the construct in your study. So for each respondent, the composite score for vision, development, reward, OC, CC, RA, RC is calculated. And where is it? Here it is. Similarly, for respondent number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up until the last respondent in the study. So what happens is, once you validate your lower order constructs, the next step is to validate the higher order construct. Now, in order to validate the higher order construct, it has to be through this latent variable score, because we did mention that Smart PLS is a confirmatory composite analysis rather than confirmatory factor analysis. So how am I going to use this latent variable scores? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click create data file. Now, once I click this create data file, it gives me a number of options as to what do you want in your new file. So what I want is the manifest variable scores. What is a manifest variable? Observed variable. Those variables on which you have collected the data by asking those questions. So each question is represented as a variable in the data. So you've got 5 items, 6 items, 7 items, 8 items on servant leadership, or let's say organizational performance, or let's say vision. So each item is contributing towards the overall data set, with some being a manifest variable. Like, let's say I asked the respondent about, I like my job. So this is a direct question measuring the latent variable of organizational commitment. Now you click manifest variable, you click latent variable scores. Obviously, we need this. And then any other demographic, if it had, it will include that as well. Create, and your data set is now created. But where is it? Here is the data set. And if you go down, you will see latent variable scores here. See the latent variable score for all the variables that were part of the lower order construct model. This one. Now, once this is done, the next step is, and as I recommended, let's say you copy it, duplicate it, and now this is not measurement model at lower order. Now you are going to check higher order construct measurement model, right? Create. Because the higher order is a construct as well, and every construct should be validated. It's not just the lower order constructs that are construct. The higher order is a construct as well. So this is a standard procedure that one has to validate all the constructs in the study. Now, higher order construct, I open it. Now I have already validated these at lower order level. I'm interested in validating this now as a higher order. So as a higher order, what happens is I remove this, and at a higher order, I will have it like this. But where is it? It's not here, because You created a new data set. Select that data set, the one with latent variable score. Here it is. Vision, development, reward. You select it through shift button, drag and drop it here, and you call it IM. Now see, this is vision, this is development, this is reward. Now at lower order, they were construct. At higher order, they became items. Items for what? IM. So I earlier mentioned that as well, that at lower order, your constructs are obviously have items. But at higher order, those constructs become items for the higher order. Now, since they have become items and this is a construct, it has to be validated. Now what we are going to do is I'm going to connect it. Now here is an important point to understand. See, this is reflective. The arrows are pointing towards the rectangle, the items. So this is reflective. So how will you validate a higher order reflective? You will do the same three things. No difference whatsoever. You will again see its loadings. You will again see its reliability. You will again see its validity. How? Again, go to calculate, PLS-SCM algorithm. Same thing. And first go to outer loadings. Now, I'm not interested in these loadings now because I've already reported these. These are already reported. I'm only interested in this. And is it that the loadings are good? Yes, the loadings are way over the recommended threshold of 0.70. So there is no issue of loading. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it to Excel and remove everything else. Let me show you. Because this is higher order, not lower order. Yes, just the way this model. Look at this model. There are both higher order, they are both lower order as well. So this is a higher order and these are lower orders. It's very much possible. This is what I'm doing now. So I'm not interested in these. I'm not interested in these. So these are the loadings. Now, similarly, once you have done the loadings, open the report. Now check for reliability and validity. I've already reported the validity, reliability, and validity of these. So I'm only interested in the last one. So copy it to Excel. So this is the alpha for the higher order construct. This is the composite reliability for the higher order construct. And this is the AVE for the higher order construct of IM. And are they within the acceptable limit? Yes, they are within the acceptable limit, or rather over the minimum threshold. Now that this is done, obviously we will have to do one more thing, discriminant validity. Now if you copy to Excel, and let's see if we've got a problem, but I guess we have a problem. Now look at the correlation of IM with CC. So IM and CC, there is a discriminant validity issue. I'm not interested in these because they've already been done previously. I'm interested in only this. So IM and CC have a issue of discriminant validity. Now, how do you solve this issue? In order to solve the discriminant validity issue, as we discussed, you have to see the standard deviation. You have to see the uh, standard deviation, that whether or not the two constructs have different responses altogether. You have to see the cross loadings as well. So whether or not there is an issue of cross loading in the data. So if there is an issue of cross loading in the data, obviously those items may be further removed. And if you remember, we did look at those as well. Now, so one has to solve these issues. So it's IM and CC. So here is the items of IM when they load onto CC, and here are the items of. So if you look here, well, there is quite some difference in the values. It's greater than 0.10. So now what you have to do is look for those standard deviation and see if the responses are significantly different in both of these constructs. Now that this is done, this is validated. Again, I'm not going to repeat the same procedure for the discriminant validity issues. We did that, and it's the same procedure one has to follow. Now that the discriminant validity is done, loadings is done, construct reliability is done, discriminant validity is done. Now I'm interested in the structural relationship, whereby I actually test my model. Now, again, what I would recommend always, as always, is that right click, duplicate, and call it HOC-SM, higher order construct, structural model. Open it. Now, in order to test the hypothesis, first, again, this will go here, and this will go here. Let me select all Alt X. Now, the indicators are gone because we are not interested in the indicators when we are assessing the structural path. Save, calculate. Let's make it 10,000. Press start. Now look at the path coefficients. Now the interpretation now will be the same as well. Now here is the interaction. Is it significant? Well, yes, both of them are significant. Now see this one. This one is weakening. Now this is a very interesting result. Let's discuss this because most of you will have these issues. So I'm going to discuss two things now here with respect to moderation. Now, the first one is that here I expected a negative relationship, that the relationship between CC and OP will be weakened by role ambiguity. And as expected, I got my expected result, and it is significant as well. And when it is significant, obviously, then I can easily do the discussion part, the literature, and all those. Now, because the literature is easily available as well. Well, now the interesting thing is that role conflict has a strong positive effect on the relationship between CC and OP. So role conflict is strengthening the relationship of collaborative culture and OP. So when you have a role conflict, this will strengthen the relationship between CC and OP. Now there are two ways to deal with it. And you will, at one point or the other during the phase of your academic career, maybe your students will come across such situation, or you might know someone who has. So now, how to deal with this situation? Can we delete the moderator from further analysis? No, I've collected data on it. Why should I delete it? Can I say to the, like in my paper or in the discussion section, that, uh, okay, what do I say? Can I change the results? No, I cannot change the results. That is unethical. So what should I do? Step one, or the first part that one should do is that find possible reasons that can explain such an effect. That why do you think that role conflict will strengthen the relationship between collaborative culture and organizational performance? Now, again, in discussion, we've got a certain level of independence in building our arguments, but they should be logical. So, when there is collaborative culture, this means that organizational performance will improve, and this relationship will be further strengthened if we've got role conflict. Now, what happens with role conflict is that at a certain amount of time, or for a certain amount of time, if there are conflict in the roles within an organization, that can help us focus more on what is required from us. So if we've got conflict in our roles, maybe we try to work harder so that we can have our roles defined and the conflict is minimized so that we do what we are good at. So to minimize the conflict, we start working more harder and we collaborate with each other to minimize this conflict. Conflict is only minimized when people start working together. Conflict is not minimized by sitting idle, don't not talking to each other, by closing the doors and not like just the way things are all around the world these days. So no, conflicts are not solved through closing the doors. Conflict are solved through talking with each other. So in this case, even in an organization, you can improve your collaborative culture. So if there is conflict, people may start talking to each other to solve those conflicts. So when they start talking with each other to solve those conflicts, what happens is this can improve the collaborative culture within the organization, and that we already know improves the organizational performance. Should we have any citation for such interpretations? Well, again, do you think that this kind of argument will have a citation in literature? Well, if you can find it, sure, you can put it in. But the thing is, not everything will have a citation. Some things in research are logical only. So I'll give you an example later as well of this as well. So again, here in this case, not everything will have a citation. Now, for example, in again, I will give the example of Indian subcontinent, both India and Pakistan. One thing that is common in all the students is from one country or the other, and it's fairly common in our region or Malaysia even, that they are asking for reference. If the thing is logical, if it makes sense, then that becomes a reference for future studies. So let me give you an example while I'm at it. Okay, you see this paper here. This is the model that we tested. We all not only developed a scale in this, but we already also tested a model. Now, this model that we tested, you know what relation, what the problem was, that the impact of servant leadership on this life satisfaction, we found it negative here. Look at this. Look at this. The direct effect was negative. How can leadership weaken life satisfaction? Servant leadership is bound to improve life satisfaction, but the results we got was negative. So how do I, like, what should I have done? Should I have changed the data? No. Should I have stopped publishing this paper or put it in a folder not to be seen again? No. I gave an argument, or rather we gave an argument. The results revealed that servant leadership has a significant impact on career satisfaction. Where is the life satisfaction one? Yeah, here it is. Now look at the argument that we gave. Now we believe that it should have been positive, but it came out negative. But obviously now you cannot just shelve your paper. It's not like you've invested time. And it was two data collected from Spain, whereby the professor collected the data. He did the writing of the results. I did the other bits. So what is the argument behind it? How do I support my results? Look at this. Contrary to the assertion, and most surprisingly, the study found a negative relationship between servant leadership and life satisfaction, whereby we expected that it will be a positive relationship. Because obviously, if there is servant leadership, this is bound to improve the life satisfaction of people. The results are contrary to the findings of the previous research, where leadership was found to have a positive impact on life satisfaction. These two researches found a positive impact of servant leadership on life satisfaction. Hereby, I found a negative impact, or we found a negative impact. The person-oriented attitude of servant leadership makes way for safe, strong relationship within the organization. Perhaps good leadership makes people enjoy work, but this prevents them to enjoy the other dimension of life. This is our argument. Now, what does this argument mean? Try to understand this now. Now, let's say I have a boss and he is very servant oriented. He is very relationship oriented. These are the dimensions, sub dimensions now. He behaves ethically. He's humble. He's focused on my development. He is all that I can imagine in a good leader. So let's say uh, that he has weaknesses as well. And maybe one of his weakness is that he likes to complete his work in time, and he expects things from others sometimes. And this is not against servant leadership. So what happens is, while he is working in the organizations, most often it happens during the weekend that he has to finish the work so that there is no pending work over the weekend. And every time when he does that and he has to do it, he asks me or my fellow colleagues to stay late. And let's say every weekend is like, if somebody has little kids like I have, my kids expect me to be home early on the weekends to have a good family dinner, maybe go out for a drive, maybe go out shopping or something like that. But every weekend, every now and then, if not a weekend, every now and then, I cannot be home in time. And when I'm home, I am tired. I have to go to bed early because I'm tired. So what's happening here is this servant leadership is having a counter effect on my life satisfaction. So even during the weekdays, if I'm at home in time, let's say 4:30, 5 o'clock, he gives me a call. Fawad, can you do this? I'll say, oh, well, I can. Why not? Because he is a servant leadership. He has taken care of my career. He has taken care of my learning. He has taken care of how my relationships are within my organization. He has taken care of my other necessities or requirements within the office. So obviously this can have a toll on my life satisfaction. He can maybe in the morning, it's early morning, Saturday morning, and I'm at home trying to have a good breakfast with my family, and he suddenly calls, Fawad, can you come over for half an hour? And I cannot say no, because again, all those reasons. So this is how you can build an argument. Now again, look at this here. The person who perhaps a good leadership makes people enjoy work, but this prevents employees from other dimensions. Additionally, it could be asserted that some leadership make people focused on their careers and less on their life. There is no reference here, no reference whatsoever. But this is built on an existing argument that what servant leadership does within the organization and how it can lead to a counter effect in life. So again, I didn't give any reference here, but I built an argument. Now, let me give you a few tips, although this is not related to smart PLS, but I guess it will be very helpful. Now, how do I know if I guess most of you will be early career researchers who have just done their PhD, or maybe they are enrolled in their PhDs, or maybe some of them are writing their proposals. Now, how do you know that if you have read enough of the research papers? How do you know that, okay, now I can start writing? So there is a simple litmus test, as we put it. The litmus test is that if you read a paper or if you read a sentence somewhere and you know that where this sentence will go in my own research paper, whether it will go in the introduction, whether it will go in the literature, whether it will go in the methodology, whether it will go in the discussion. If you read a sentence, let's say if I give you this sentence and you do not know from where it came, and then you can tell me that this sentence most probably have come from the discussion section. And if 9 out of 10 times you are able to identify that a particular sentence will go into that particular section, then I will say you are ready to start writing your thesis, your paper, or your proposal. Other than that, I would say keep taking notes, keep recording information, keep documenting what you are reading in an Excel sheet, and start to write a rough. But you cannot say that, okay, now I'm ready and I'm going to write it and I'm going to submit it. No, this is not the way. Second thing is, if you want to write well, if you want to write good, if you want to write meaningful, any sentence that you write, for example, this sentence maybe. Now, this sentence that you have written here, how would I know whether this is the right place for this sentence or not? If the preceding sentence can lead to this sentence, and if this sentence can stimulate the next sentence. This is how you build an argument. So you cannot just say that, okay, I've written this sentence, this matches my study, but does it match the argument that you are trying to build? If you are not sure, then you haven't structured your paper properly. You haven't structured your research properly. So if you think that you want to be ready for something like this or write up, then you have to make sure that you have answers to these 2 or 3 things. Okay, now, so there could be another question. Let's say you have a question that, okay, now this is totally wrong. This is utterly wrong. This can never be negative. It doesn't make sense to be positive. It has to be negative. Let's say we are doing a study whereby it is impossible for a moderator to strengthen a relationship. It will always weaken that relationship. So in that case, what will you do? Will you try to find an argument? Well, I don't think so, because it has to be negative. It will negatively impact the relationship. So what will I do? Now, in that case, what can happen is, again, I will say go for uh, the demographic that you have. So let's say that's the reason I always encourage 2 things. One is to have data like 300, 400 respondents, at least 400 respondents, and try to have more data from different demographics. And in each demographic or in each category, have at least 30 to 40 responses. Now, if you've done like this, and you've got 400 responses, and for each category, you've got 30, 40 responses. Now, for each category, let's say different age groups, you do this model for different age groups. And in one of the age groups, you find that it is positive and it is highly positive. That particular group may be causing all the disruption. Now conduct your analysis by removing it and see whether it improves your results or not. The same thing you can do, let's say, but that's slightly complex and it will take time if I do it now, but let me explain it and then you can later work on it. Let's say there is a positive impact or positive relationship between 2 variables whereby you expected a negative relationship. So you expected a negative relationship and turns out to be positive. Now perform a cross-tab analysis between responses of those questions or different questions and see if a particular response to a particular question is totally in like it's in the same direction whereby you wanted them in the opposite direction. So let's say I've got 2 questions in CC. Let's say I've got 2 questions in OP. Let's assume I expected a positive relationship. I'm getting a negative relationship. So if I do my cross tab, I find out that this particular CC1 question, if it is higher, the CC or the OP2 question is getting lower or getting a low value. So you can do it through correlation as well. Or you can use cross tab if you've got categories of variables. Let's say for which category of the demographic the problem persists, that it is showing an inverse relationship or the positive relationship. So this is how you can test your data. See individual correlation between values. See cross-tab analysis for different groups for different variables. See if the expected relationship is deviating. Where is it deviating? For which particular category? For which particular group? And whenever it is deviating that's the problem in your data. Try to remove it and run the model again. Now, any questions before we move on? No
So
questions?
one common question,
Yes, please.
nothing really. Like if we have to give reference for each and everything, then what's the meaning of gap that we are finding out? What is
Very good.
new in my study?
Very good question. Now, not everything will require a reference. Now, your question has two parts.
Hmm.
Let's understand it. And let me give you an example as well. Let's say I'm conducting a research, okay? And let me open one research here. Hmm. So this is a paper that we did some time ago. And in this paper, what we did was we assessed the relationship between corporate social responsibility and organizational performance with mediating role of team outcomes. All right.
Hmm.
Now, when I or me and my students, when because this was a paper from the thesis of my student. So when we were working on it and we were searching for team outcomes, nobody assessed the impact of these variables in the relationship between CSR and OP. Nobody, none.
Hmm. Okay.
And one other thing was nobody recommended as well. So there was no reference that somebody said that team identity or team efficacy, team commitment, team performance are the variables, and nobody has assessed it, and there is a need for future research. Nobody.
Hmm.
So there was no reference, but again, the reference was required to identify the importance of team outcomes as an intervening variable in the relationship between CSR and OP. So a reference in this case was required to highlight the importance of team outcomes. Sometimes the reference is required to mention that if somebody has recommended it. There are two
Hmm.
ways to do it. Not every time you will need each one of them. So what I normally tell my scholars or students is you can always come up with your own model, with your own new original model, which nobody has assessed. All right. But then you will have to find why this particular relationship is important to be assessed. Why is it important to study this relationship? Let me give you an example. I'm sorry, we are deviating slightly, but this is important as well since it has come up. Let's say I write here an entrepreneurial, I hope the spelling is correct, leadership, and I write project success. So there are one, two, three, or actually there are just two papers. One, this 2020. Now, this is a thesis. This is not a paper. I
Hmm.
guess it is only one paper that has been written on the relationship of entrepreneurial leadership and project success. And that too, this paper is by us. All right, let me open this paper. Okay, where is it? So before us, nobody wrote anything on entrepreneurial leadership and project success. Nobody.
Hmm.
Since nobody recommended it. So we said that, okay, since there is no research, we are going to do it. But then again, we explained why is it important to be done? Why is it important to link entrepreneurial leadership to project success? So again, you do not require reference every time, but when you are proposing a new research, you have to provide the importance of those concepts. Why is it important to link those concepts? Although nobody has recommended for you to write such a paper, But again, you need to write why that particular relationship should be studied, and that too in the introduction. I hope this makes sense. I'll share these papers and you will find
Yes.
how to build those arguments. Now, this was about a reflective construct and how to validate it and how to test your structural relationships if you've got a reflective construct. And in this case, we had one reflective construct, and that was internal marketing. Now, let's assume for the same model that this internal marketing is not reflective. Rather, it is reflective formative. So instead of reflective, I'm taking these higher order construct of IM as reflective formative. Now, again, for reflective formative, the step one will remain the same. Where is my step one? Here is my step one. The step one remains the same, no change, irrespective of whether IM is a higher order reflective formative or higher order reflective. Irrespective of it, it does not matter. It should be, just give me a second. Okay, now irrespective of whether it is has a higher order construct or it does not have a higher order construct, whether it is reflective higher order or whether it is reflective formative higher order, does not matter. And if it all of them have lower order constructs, so the first step always remains the same, and that is that you will have to assess their factor loadings, you have to assess their reliability, and you will have to assess their validity. Now, once this is done, and we go for latent variable scores. Now, once you run this model, you go for latent variable scores, you get your latent variable score, you again do the same thing. Okay, let me do it again. So we go to calculate, PLS SCM algorithm, start. So where are my latent variable scores? Here they are. Here are the scores, and I'll create my data file. Once I create my data file, again, these two and this, and I will override. Because in this case, I will override because I already have it, or otherwise you will save it. Now, once you save it, here it is. I will duplicate my model, this one. Okay, let me do it so that it's repeated. Here is the model. Go back. Let's duplicate it. And let's call it higher order construct underscore measurement model, and I'll create it. Now, once I create it, first thing is to make sure that I've got the right data set selected. And in this case, this is the data set. Once this is selected, now since it is higher order construct validation, so I will remove vision, I will remove development, I will remove rewards. And what I will have is, I will have these as items for the higher order construct. Right click, rename, call it IM. Now, once this is done, connect it. Let's say we have a direct relationship here. Now, one thing, how would I change it to formative? Right click, right click, invert measurement model. So if you are unable to select it, make sure you've selected the select option. Sometimes students have selected delete and they are pressing and everything is getting deleted. So in this case, make sure select is selected and then go for invert measurement model. Now look at the arrows. The arrows are now pointing towards the latent variable. Now this has changed the internal marketing construct to a formative higher order construct. Clear? Now, this is done. Now I will need to validate this again at higher order level. Now, in order to validate it at higher order level, what I will do is, let's save it, calculate, And first I will run PLS SCM algorithm. Okay, let me show you something here. Now, so how do we validate the formative indicator? Assess the level of collinearity in the formative measurement model. So where is your VIF values, or where are the VIF values? So in order to go for VIF values, just go to calculate PLS SCM algorithm, nothing else to look into, just start. And here are your VIF values. And this is I'm interested in. I'm not interested in anything else. I'm only interested in this. Yes, this is disjoint two-stage approach. Embedded is not preferred most of the times now. So go for disjoint two-stage approach. Now, what is disjoint two-stage approach? I'll explain. Now, this is 2.385, this is 1.709, this is 2.006. How would I know whether this is acceptable or not? So according to this book by Here et al., no critical levels of collinearity if your VIF values are less than 5. So there are these values less than 5? Yes, they are. So there is no issue of collinearity. VIF values are good. So once this is done, what's the next step? If the values are greater than 5, what will you do? You have to treat your collinearity issues. How do you treat your collinearity issues? Again, look for the correlation between variables. Look for the correlation based on groups. So for which group your relationships are very high. So maybe you have multicollinearity issues. Assess your VIF values for different groups. So what you do is you create groups in Smart PLS. We'll talk about creating groups later. And then see your model in each group. And I'm going to discuss that later with you. All right. Now that this is done, the next step is we check for outer weight significance. So significance of outer weights is the next step. So where is the significance of outer weights? We will go to calculate, and now we will click bootstrapping. Again, 10,000 is recommended. Now I'm going to go for 10,000. Bias corrected. Let's go for one-tailed and start. And if we go for here, look at this, outer weights. And look at this here. Are these outer weights significant? Well, these two are, but this is insignificant. What should I do? Shall I delete it? Rewards? No. You will not delete it. Although it is insignificant, there is another test to be performed. Outer weight is significant, good enough, continue. Outer weight is not significant. Now see their indicators, outer loadings. So where are the outer loadings? Just above outer weights are the outer loadings. Look at the outer loadings. They are very good. They are over 0.50. So the outer loadings are over 0.50. Hence, we do not need to delete it. Now, even if this was less than 0.50, if this is significant, no issue. So let's assume this is not 0.702. Let's assume this is 0.402. Now, let's see this. So weight is in terms of weight of impact contribution in forming that particular formative construct. Whereas loading is in general terms the variance explained in the dependent variable by the independent variable, in this case the item. So how much variance is the predictor explaining in forming the construct, and how much weight does it carry, how much weight of impact does it have in forming the construct. One is with the representation of the item and or the variance in the dependent variable, and other is the weight of impact in comparison to the other two variables. So they have got higher weight of impact in comparison to this one. Now this one is, although this is 0.402, assume this is 0.402, but this is significant. You will not delete it. No need to delete it. Have a look here. Greater than 0.5, no issue. Less than 0.5, see if it is significant. Now, let's say it is outer weight is insignificant. Outer loading is less than 0.50. Outer loading is insignificant. Then obviously there is no other way. It is not contributing in any way to the forming of the construct. You should delete it. Now, this is what we call validation of your construct. Now, there is one other thing that you will read about it, and that is called the um, convergent validity or redundancy analysis. In higher order formative construct, we do redundancy analysis as well. And how does that redundancy analysis work? Now, that redundancy analysis is done if you assess the impact of this formative construct on a global measure of that construct. So, for example, I had 15 or 14 questions of internal marketing. And after those 14 questions, I asked a general question, and I knew that internal marketing is a higher order reflective formative construct. So I asked an overall question that how, like, for example, let's say I asked overall the organization has decent internal marketing initiatives. Now, this is a global measure. This covers the overall gist of the concept of this formative construct. Now, in order to assess that, what I will do is I will create a separate model. Let's see if I've got it here. I don't know whether I had it in this data set or not. Yeah, here it is, global measure. So I did not export it. So let me do it like this here, just hold on. So in order to do redundancy analysis, let's do redundancy analysis. And what I'll do is, but I do not have a global variable here. Okay. So let's say vision, development, and for rewards, we only had 3. Control A, Alt X. So I need a composite score for these, so I can link it with the global variable. All right. So what I can do is, let's say I put it here. Calculate PLS algorithm, start. I need to export this. And let's say redundancy analysis data. Go back, change your data set now. This one, development, rewards, vision. So you need your latent variable scores and link it with the global variable. The variable or the item that is representing the construct as an overall construct or the items of the construct. And you name it IM. And now link it. Now run the model. PLS SCM is fine because we just need the coefficient. Is this coefficient over 0.70? Yes, it is. So this means the convergent validity for the higher order formative construct is established, or the redundancy analysis is satisfactory. So what you need to do is a quick recap. You need the reason I created a new model, because in the latent variable score data, I did not have the global variable. I did not export it. So I got the latent variable scores for this. I created a formative construct. Let me see if I did it. Yeah, it was not formative. So let's say invert. Move it here. Now it is formative. Even if you run it, the path coefficients won't change. Oh yeah, it's changed slightly. Actually, it improved. So it is greater than 0.70. This means redundancy analysis was satisfactory. So you need the composite scores, and model your higher order construct like this, and then link it to the global variable if you have it in your study. Now, at times, you may not even have it in your study. Don't worry about it. No need to report it if you don't have it. Okay. Now, how do you report your higher order construct validation? Let me show you. Okay, here it is. Now, here is a paper in which I used a higher order reflective formative construct. The paper was recently published in 2022, November or December 2022, last year actually, not recently now. So it was on university social responsibility and performance, the role of service quality, reputation, student satisfaction, and trust. And university social responsibility was taken as a higher order construct that had 4 subdimensions. Here is the scale construct for university social responsibility, and here are the number of items. Now, these items had 4 dimension. I guess I made a mistake here. I should have mentioned the dimension here in the text as well, in the table as well. But so these are the lower order constructs: ethical responsibility, research, development responsibility, philanthropic responsibilities. 3 dimensions of university social responsibility. This is how you present your results of university social responsibility, the higher order construct. So first you write that USR was a higher order construct with 3 lower order constructs, and these were the lower order constructs. To validate the higher order formative construct, multicollinearity was assessed using variance inflation factor. VIF values were this. Indicate no collinearity issues. In the present study, collinearity does not pose any threat as the VIF values were less than 5. Next, statistical significance and relevance of outer weights was assessed. SASTET 2019. Now, if you want to master the art of using higher order construct, this is the paper. This one here. So let me share with everyone here. So read it. It's a must for anyone to understand the higher order construct analysis. Except for philanthropic responsibility, where I got the outer weights as insignificant, outer loadings were fine for all of them. Hence, higher order construct was validated. So this is how you write the results of higher order constructs, and this is how you present them in a table. Here it is. Because the data in this case was collected from 3 countries, Pakistan, China, 2 countries, Pakistan and China. So here it is. So you first represent the VIF values, then outer weights, their T statistics, the T statistics for the outer weights, their p-value, outer loading, and their p-value. Again for the China and again for the overall data. So I'll share this paper as well. So this is how you validate your higher order formative construct. So what we have done till now today is we have assessed the reflective for a higher order construct and how to check it for validated and how to check it for. I know one more thing. I'm sorry. Before I can do this, go back. Let me see. So again, if it's a formative, let's say it is a formative, and let's say if I connect it here or don't connect it, well, it's the same thing. Let me connect it. And let me delete this. Now, again, to test your hypothesis after you have validated it, you don't have to do anything else but just press or do bootstrapping. And that's it. Bootstrapping, interpret the results, and report it. That's about it. Okay. Now, there are 2 other statistics that we are normally interested in, and we actually report them as well. And those are the F-square values and Q-square values. So let me open a presentation. Okay, now model explanatory power. Now, we have all heard about the concept of R square, and we did discuss it earlier as well. Now, R square represents the variance explained in each of the endogenous variables, endogenous constructs, and is measured and is a measure of the model's explanatory power, and also referred to as in-sample predictive power. So where is R square in your model? Let's say this is my model. And let's say if I run it here. And if you see here, you will have values here. But see, there are no values here because they are not influenced by any variable in the study. So if they are not influenced by any variable, they will not have any values whatsoever in those circles. So this variable here, the value is 0.628. So if you multiply it with 100, this means 62.8% change in organizational performance is being accounted by three variables. Why three? Why not these two? Well, actually, these two are also included in this case because they are not directly, like there is no arrow, but indirectly they are influencing. There is an inherent arrow. So this 62.8% change in OP is being accounted by IM, OC, CC, RC, RA, and the interaction effects as well. So and this one here, 501, is only by IM. So 50.1% change in the context of this study in organizational commitment is being explained by internal marketing. 61.3% change in the context of this study in collaborative culture is being explained by IM. Now, how good it is. Now, let's again, the same example, 62.3% change in a variable is being explained by X1, X2, X3. Now, the arrows, you have to look for the arrows that are pointing towards a variable. So those arrows are actually explaining the variance in that particular variable. Now, how do you look at the values of those R square, or how do you look at the R square values? Now, according to Falk and Miller, they recommended that R square values should be equal to or greater than 0.10 in order for the variance explained to a particular endogenous construct to be deemed adequate. How would I know that my R square values are adequate? Now, according to Falk and Miller, if the values are greater than 0.10, then they are, as you can say, they are adequate. Now, there is another perception. Then there is Cohen 1988, who says that endogenous latent variables assessed as 0.26 or over substantial. If it is 0.13, it is moderate. If it is between 0.202 to 0.12, it is a weak. Then Chin has got another recommendation, 0.67, 0.33, 0.19. Well, I normally report this in my studies. Suggested a scholarly research in that R square values 0.75, 0.50, and 0.25, they are substantial, moderate, or weak. So in this case, we've got moderate, weak to moderate. But again, it is very subjective. Sometimes I use this as well. So whatever kind of R square I get, I use it to my advantage, these references. And this is what we do in social sciences research. Try to use these things to your advantage. Now, F square. What is F square? A variable in a structural model may be affected or influenced by a number of different variables. Now look at this. OP is influenced by all these variables in the model, isn't it? All these variables. Removing an exogenous variable can affect the dependent variable. So if I remove a variable from this model, let's say if I remove this one or this one or this one or these moderating effect, this can affect organizational performance. F square is the assessment of how it affects that R square variable, or sorry, R square of the variable. So F square ranges from greater than 0.02 is small, greater than 0.15 is medium, greater than 0.35 is large. So is it a small effect, medium effect, or large effect if we remove a construct from the study? So where is R square? Let's say, here it is. So you run PLS algorithm and you will have this R square. So look at this. If I remove CC, it does not affect the R square of the, or in the model of the OP. Because look at this, it is red, it is 0.002. Look at this, it is 0.002, even less than 0.02. So having CC or not having CC does not affect the R square value of OP. Well, here it has got an effect, a small kind of effect. Here it is too much. So IM is a critical variable in explaining the variance in the dependent variable. So what it does is it explains which variable is providing or making a considerable impact in explaining the variance in the outcome variable. These two are weak. The red ones are weak. The black ones, you can say, to a certain extent, they approach moderate, and these ones you can say are quite strong. Now, finally, you've got another thing, another square as we call it, and that is referred to as Q square. Now, Q square is predictive relevance, measures whether a model has predictive relevance or not. Now, Q square is used to measure or model predictive relevance and whether or not your model has predictive relevance. Now, what do you mean by predictive relevance? Let's understand this concept. In this case, in this model, we've got this being predicted and these as predictors. Now, this is being predicted, this is the predictor. This is being predicted and all others are the predictor. How relevant are these predictors in predicting the outcome variable? This is what we normally refer to as predictive relevance. So how relevant are these predictors in predicting this outcome? How would I know? For that, I need my Q square. So it establishes the predictive relevance of the endogenous variables. Now, Q square values above 0, remember, Q square values above 0 will show that the model has predictive relevance. Now, how good are they? Again, we can use this same scale that we have used earlier, 0.02, 0.15, and 0.35. And they show us weak, moderate, or strong degree of predictive relevance. So how good are your predictors in predicting that particular outcome? If your Q square is 0.02, well, it's not that good. It is weak predictor in case of predicting the outcome. It's how relevant it is. Well, it's weakly relevant. 0.15, it's moderately relevant. 0.35, it's strongly relevant. Now, Q square is predictive relevance, measures whether a model has predictive relevance or not. Q square establishes the predictive relevance of the endogenous construct. Q square values above 0, okay, we have already talked about, and this is again a repetition. Now, here are the references for all these. So you will need these references when you are writing your paper. So I'll share this at the end of the session. All right. I've already saved it, I guess, here in your, yes, it's here. So where is your Q square? Go to calculate and click PLS predict. Go to calculate and click PLS predict. And let's start. Okay, so, and here you will click LV prediction summary. And look at this, leave this, you do not need these, just look at this. The predictive relevance for CC is 0.60, for OC 0.48, for OP 0.55. So these are strong, this is like substantially relevant. The model that you have, the predictors in the model are strongly relevant because all your values are over 0.35. So this model that you have designed is a well thought of model because the predictors that you have chosen, they show that they are strongly relevant in explaining the organizational performance or in getting this particular outcome. Again, how do you report it? Very easy. When you are reporting your hypothesis results, just beneath the hypothesis results, you can put it in the same table. All right. Let me show you if I've done it. Yeah, here. R square, Q square, R square, and Q square. You can report F square as here as well. So you can report F square here with the relationships. because that is based on the relationships that you have proposed. So how much, or whether that removing that predictor from that outcome will affect or not. So you can have F square column here and report it here like this. All right. And how do you do it? Just let me show you quickly. Here it is. F square. So the relationship between CC and OP, the relationship between CC and OC, the relationship between IM and CC, the relationship between OC and IM. So this is the F square for each relationship. So that's why I said you can add a column here and just mention the IF square for that particular relationship. So this is how you do your higher order construct analysis, and with R square, F square, and Q square. Tomorrow, what I have in store for tomorrow is we'll do multi-group analysis. And I will recap all these things with a detailed complex model whereby I will have higher order moderator, higher order reflective independent variable, higher order formative mediator, or higher order formative independent, or I'll change it. So it will be a very complex model with higher order reflective, higher order reflective formative, with some lower order constructs as well, and a moderator as well. So tomorrow it's going to be a quick complete recap with a more complex model, and we will report or put in Word document all those results so that you know how to structure it as well. Plus we'll do multi-group analysis.